Welcome to another Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. There's loads of people here. It's amazing. This isn't... Hello, say hello to the people. You're on two podcasts. I'm in my high-backed armchair, and as it occurs to me, that's blown that joke. So this week's podcast is Tony Robinson. Do go and support his Movember campaign. The link's in the blurb. Go and look for it. You'll see his pathetic moustache. It's got a bit better by now because it recorded a bit ago. Also, my new DVD, Happy Now, is out today. If you're watching this on November the whatever Wednesday is, 16th. If you order this today, you'll get entered into a draw where you can win the grandchildren's sport here doormat that I use in this very show. So that could be yours, but you don't have to do that. There's loads of extras on here. It's the perfect Christmas gift for you, probably. So put it on your... Put it on, just buy it for yourself and then open it and go, oh, that's what I wanted. So anyway, let's sit back and enjoy Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast with Tony Robinson. Sir Tony Robinson. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Leicester Square Theatre. Please welcome a man who is now obsessed with Brian Blessed. It's Richard Herring! Hello! Hello, my friends. How you doing? Where's the lady from... She's gone as well. Fucking hell, what's happened? Everyone's walking out on me, so it's a brand new audience, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Welcome to Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. I was talking to H from Steps. Do you know what the H stood for? No, it wasn't that. It was hyperactive. So he calls it RHLSTP. I don't know. And he's obsessed with shortening things to just their letter form, though. That's his problem. It's lovely audience we got here. Let's see. But there's a lot of bearded men as usual. I don't mind that. I'm not prejudiced because in a way I am one. So that would be weird to be prejudiced. Some fine. You've got a little. Is there a little one? Really yeah, there is. It's like sort of Noel Edmonds hiding underneath the chin. Like a young Noel Edmonds there. So what's your name?
Joe.
Joe. That's a lovely name. And what do you do for a living?
I'm like a sub-editor.
Oh, yeah. So you edit a submarine magazines? What's that? Is he your editor?
No.
No, that's insulting, isn't it? Actually, he looks like he could be an editor. Look, he's got glasses. No, what do you do?
I'm a financial consultant.
You're a financial consultant. So you just ask people, say, what should I do with my money? And you go, give it to me. Give a percentage of it to me, and then do this with the rest of it. You make me sick. What magazines would you work on?
Nothing of any interest.
No, it is of interest to me. Don't put yourself down, Joe. I'm very interested in you.
It's like a B2B sponsorship marketing.
Oh, fuck it. Can I ask? And Rasputin on the end. There's always a Rasputin figure. And always with a beautiful lady, so that proves the power of the Rasputin. Look, what's your name, sir?
Adam.
Adam. Hello, Adam. And what do you do when you're not being a Svengali for a royal family?
Designer.
You're a designer. You're from Wales? Yeah. I thought there was something wrong with you when you said Adam. I thought, he said Adam in a really weird way. I better go easy on him. It just turns out he's Welsh. I can do what I like. You're a designer? Yeah. Yeah, what have you designed? Did you design that T-shirt?
No.
No, good. Sorry, that's not really
I design newspaper.
You design newspaper. Get together with this guy. He does. What was it again that you would?
B2B marketing and sponsorship.
A B2B. Is it like bees that fly around? There's some newspaper for bees that they go send to other because they're all in their own hive, aren't they? So how do they know what's going on with it? Is that it? They don't know what's going on in the other hives. So they have you go between the bees. His main is bzzz. Yeah. And what's the buzz this week?
Nice.
Okay, I think we'll crack on because we've got a good guest. What am I doing wasting my time out here? So thank you for coming, everyone. Lovely to see you. My guest this week, you're much better than last week's audience, is probably best known as Titch from Big Jim and the Figaro Club. That's why we're all here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome Sir... Oh, yeah. We got a sir on. Proper, he's a knight. Tony Robinson, ladies and gentlemen. Tony Robinson. Do you insist on this, on the sir? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, it was funny actually because when I first knew.
Or pick up your microphone because you need to talk into this.
I didn't understand.
That's all right. I didn't tell
Shall
you.
we start again? Well, when I first knew that I was going to be knighted, it's all a big secret. But I thought it was such a weird and wonderful thing that I thought I'll never be able to stop thinking about it. And in fact, I couldn't share it with anyone else other than my wife. But we wanted to talk about it to each other all the time. So if there was anybody else around, we'd do this tiny little sign to each other where we would just circle. This is a terrible story for something which is essentially sound, is it? No vision.
There is some vision as well.
We would just go like that, circle without fingers, just do a little prod, like a knight fighting somebody, a tiny knight. But we would do it terribly discreetly, just to say to each other, isn't it amazing? I'm going to get a knighthood. But like within 3 months, you just forget about it completely. And whenever anyone says sir, like in a restaurant or something, you just think they're being ludicrously obsequious and just get on with your tea.
Well, I've got a story about when I found out you were a knight.
Yeah.
I found out in a kind of weird way. Because I was driving back from a gig, or it was a kind of disturbing experience. I was driving back from a gig and the news came on, and the first news story was, and the woman reading the news story went, Tony Robinson, who played Baldrick on Blackadder. And I was going, oh God, no, he can't do this. This is terrible. I was really genuinely upset. And then he said, and Adele. What has Tony Robinson been doing with Adele? And they both died doing it. I was genuinely going, fuck, it's been some kind of coach crash. Have got awards. They said it, and they did it like a joke. It wasn't deliberate, but it was just like a really horrific. So I thought you were dead for a couple of seconds, and then I was glad to find out you were in fact a knight instead. But
you'd never even met me. You wouldn't have cared. But either way, it was just an interesting news story.
Well, no, it's just it's a horrible shock to surprise, isn't it, to someone just to go like that. When you might expect, it's happened a lot this year.
Jimmy Young died tonight. Most people here will never have heard of Jimmy Young, but he was 95 and he used to sing Unchained Melody when I was in my early teens. Oh, my love, my darling, I've hungered for your touch. Oh, it was wonderful, and he's dead.
Now you've broken that. I didn't know about that, so thanks a lot. That is, at least I've got a story about that. If how I found out Jimmy Young died, Sir Tony Robinson sang Unchained Melody. Oh, that's sad. But he had a good knock, didn't he?
Yeah, you can't be overwhelmingly sad when someone's 95 and dies. But it's just it's like saying goodbye to all those memories, isn't it? Yeah. That's what's so sad about that kind of thing.
So, there's loads to talk to you about. It's insane. Your book is out, which is called No Cunning Plan.
Where did I get that title from? I don't know.
And I've just got it today, but I have read quite a lot of it, and I think it's a very interesting read. As I was saying to you backstage, I'm fascinated by that kind of leapfrogging between the generations, which you get in everything, but I think especially in theatre and things that you'll find out someone's work. I found that Harry Shearer had worked with Abbott and Costello, which seemed impossible. And you were in the original stage version of Oliver, the first time it was done.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's pretty incredible for a starter.
And the man who played Mr. Sowerby, the Undertaker, who was like he was this hippie with really greasy hair, and he was probably only about 26, but he looked like this really old man to me, and he got a strange voice like a bird, and he was so scary. And it was Barry Humphries. It was the first job he ever did over here.
So it's amazing. Those things are amazing. And Lionel Bart, you write about in the book about meeting Lionel Bart, who obviously wrote Oliver, and is this very affluent, perfumed man, as you say.
Yeah, he was the first man that I ever met who smelt of perfume. Perfume was something which was essentially about women. Men smelt of fags or sweat. That was the way the world worked. And suddenly there was this man who you could smell from 2 or 3 yards, and it was so exotic.
And he had, I mean, you made a load of money. You'd written for Cliff Richard,
Huge
and
amounts,
obviously
yeah.
the Oliver did pretty well for him as well. But then he lost, because I met Lionel Bart, or I saw Lionel Bart when I lived in Acton in the early 1990s. He lived above the Oddbins in a little flat. And his whole, but you're writing about him having all this, generosity and money, and then that's the other end of his career is this, he did get some money, didn't he? Cameron McIntosh gave him some money towards the end.
That's right.
He didn't have any of the rights. He'd sold the rights to Oliver. Right?
Yes, he sold when he was really up against it. He sold the rights for very, very cheap. But he had this weird kind of wealth, the sort of James Bond type of wealth, where it's said, I don't know whether it's true or not, but he had this house in Kensington with 20 bedrooms, and every night was party night, and they would pass around two silver salvers, one which was covered in drugs and the other which was covered in money, and you could just take what you wanted.
Right.
It didn't take him all that long to become bankrupt.
Do you think, how many of you did? I mean, it's sort of interesting, isn't it, to live that kind of lifestyle, to have that money and blow it all out your arse, basically. It's what you want to do.
But there's a lovely kind of innocence about it, isn't there? It's like this money is just going to go on forever and ever because people are giving me money and they constantly will. That's really sweet. And the fact that, another example of what you were saying about history, that Cameron McIntosh bailed him out. Cameron, when I was at the Central School of Speech and Drama, he was on the stage management course.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, and he was this geeky kid with this home knitted jumper with the elbows out. And whenever anything went wrong, we'd go, oh, Cameron, you're so silly. And then he became this hugely wealthy man.
Yeah. And you also, like, early on, you were a child actor as well. So you worked with Judy Garland, or you were in a film with Judy Garland, and a film with John Wayne. Yeah. Which again, that just seems like impossible to me. That 1 degree of separation between you and John Wayne.
Yeah, I was probably in my early 20s by the time that I did the film with John Wayne. Yeah. It was a film called Brannigan, and basically the idea was that he was an American copper who'd come over to England to extradite some mafia man back to America, and so he had to deal with the English police. The English policeman was Dickie Attenborough, and I was the red herring. They needed a motorbike messenger who could follow all over London, and the Hollywood idea of following somebody through London was that you passed Trafalgar Square, and then you passed Tower Bridge, and then you passed Buckingham Palace. You'd have to be a real rip-off cab driver to take anybody that way, but it was good to show the Americans all these views. Yeah. And I went up for the part, and I was living in Bristol, and I went up on my motorbike to Shepperton, and the producer actually thought I was a real motorbike messenger. Right. And it just took me ages to explain to him that I was an actor there for the part of a motorbike messenger. Right. He was so thrilled by this serendipity that he gave me the part without even making me read any of the scripts at all. And so I found myself... I was sharing a Winnebago with Richard Attenborough, and loads of talks with Wayne. It was odd because I was like on anti-Vietnam War demos, and I was right next to John Wayne thinking, tee-hee-hee, you don't know what I've been doing, you right-wing bastard.
Well, there's loads of things. I mean, lots of people who ask me to talk about all sorts of things, and they're not necessarily the things that you might jump to mind. I first became, the first time I saw you, I remember, was in Who Dares Wins, which was like a big influence on me when I was growing up as one of the kind of... It was Channel 4, wasn't it?
That's right,
One of the first sort of Channel 4 sort of team comedy shows with Rory McGrath and Jimmy Mulville.
That's right.
And Julia Hills.
Yes. Essentially, it was the people who went on to create Hat Trick Productions. Yeah. All except me.
But you were too good. You were the best one in it, and the others weren't good enough to carry on performing. Right. They just had to go and make millions of pounds.
I'll tell you a story. It's traduced themselves, cheapening their talents. When Who Dares Wins ran for about 4 series, and it was by far the dirtiest thing on television. And we did an Emperor's New Clothes sketch where essentially it was written by Jimmy and Rory, and they were selling me a suit, except there was no suit at all. I was actually naked, and we did it on telly. And I had a little jock strap on, which was velcroed onto my pubic hair. But
yeah. And I watched today, and you've got a fine bush of pubic hair
Thank
there.
you
You do see a lot of the pubic hair.
I can hold my velcro. But you couldn't see that I wasn't naked because it was one of those artful things where there was always someone's head in the way or a prop or something like that. But then we went out on tour and did a sort of farewell Who Dares Wins tour. And I actually did do it naked on the stage, although when we were doing the sketch I had my hand over my crutch, but then I would whip round to the front of the theatre and then I would walk down through the centre of the stalls, stark bollock naked without my hands over my crutch, looking for my clothes as though Jimmy and Rory had hidden them. And given my figure, it got quite a good laughter, really. But anyway, it was okay until we got to Lincoln, and it was at a cinema, the Ritz Cinema, which didn't have one of those little corridors from the stage right round to the back of the stalls. So when I got off stage, the stage manager gave me a dressing gown and slippers, and I ran through the car park, and then I quickly threw the dressing gown and the slippers back to the stage manager, who had to piss back to the prompt corner because he got a cue to give, and then I pushed the door to go in and make my entrance, and I'm in the car park pushing on this door which won't open. And so I race round to the next door and push on that, and that won't open either. I go back to the stage door, stark bollock naked. That is a fire door too. That won't open. I go 3/4 of the way round the whole cinema and realise that eventually I'm going to have to walk into the street without my clothes on and just go in through the front, which I eventually did. And there were two programme sellers counting the money for the programmes as I went in, and I just said, "Evening," and just walked boldly past them and into the stalls, by which time the sketch that I was supposed to be in was completely over. But it didn't matter. Anyone nude walking through is going to get a laugh anyway.
Well, in the original TV show, you just kept on walking around naked. You didn't know the sketch was over, I think. Is that right? So it kind of fitted in quite well with that.
Yes, it did. But once again, I always had my hands on my... But people who'd seen it on the telly thought they'd seen my dick.
On TV.
Even though they hadn't. That's really weird, isn't it?
They just wanted to so much. It was, well, a lot of people wanted to know about tales from Fat Tulip's garden. This is more than anything. That was the thing that people were tweeting about.
Well, that's lovely that they should have done that. This was a kids series that I made round about the time of the first Blackadder. So I was well known enough to get into the office door to discuss projects with senior producers, but it gave me 30 seconds, which I hadn't had a few years previously, and I had this idea of this garden like the ones that I used to play in with a child, but that was peopled by crazy animals and crazy plants and flowers like Fat Tulip, and I never actually specified whether Fat Tulip was a person or an animal or what, and it was semi-improvised and semi-scripted.
Yeah.
I remember we shot some of them in Southend, and there was this little cockle who I called Jim Morrison, and my favourite line, one of the stories ended, and all that Fat Tulip could hear was a meep, meep, meep noise, which was the sound of Jim Morrison crying for his mummy. But weirdly, and this is such an odd coincidence, the house that the guy who was finding all the sets for us discovered was a house that I used to play in as a child. What's the odds of that? And after the show was over, and people got very romantic about it because a lot of people watched it when they were 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
Or 16-year-olds would say to me, "Cool, I love that show on children's television. I used to go home, spliff up and watch it." Anyway, the house burnt down.
Right.
And even now, to this day, in Woodford Green, there is this ghastly shape of this huge burnt-out house and this garden which is now covered in weeds and you can hardly get into, and it's Fat Tulip's garden.
Oh, no. Terrible. Night of terrible sadness. And I wanted to talk about Maid Marian and her Merry Men, which again I think would be a popular choice, which was an amazing show. And I watched this, but I must have been an adult by the time that was on. But it was a very funny show. It was in a way, in that tradition of kids' TV that is, tis was and is good enough for, that adults will enjoy as well.
Yeah, well, when I started writing it, I'd got 2 young kids, and my daughter was about 9 or 10 at that time. And when she brought her friends home with her, they liked watching The Adder and The Young Ones and Dawn and Jennifer, who had just got their first show on by then, and Lenny Henry. They loved watching them far more than they liked watching children's television. And it occurred to me that if you could create a show that was like those shows, but without the bum and tits gags in there, then you ought to be able to make something that kids felt was written for them rather than written at them. And that's how I felt when I saw an awful lot of children's television. I never thought that in the 50s, but by the late 60s and 70s, there seemed to be this really patronising feel about an awful lot of children's television, which I really wanted to get rid of. And my daughter was very much of a tomboy, and when she was tiny, and when she was in her last year at primary school, she managed to boss herself into being in the school football team by sheer force of her personality. And she was rubbish at football. But she was like one of the twin strikers, and she would hurtle around chasing the ball, and all the rest of the team would be chasing her like a swarm of tiny bees. And she would be berating them about how incompetent they were. But whenever she got the ball, it would just bounce off her and bounce away again. And I thought, blimey, if Laura had been around when Robin Hood was around, it certainly wouldn't have been him that was running the gang.
Yeah.
And it was just that one thought was that, they always say, don't they, that you've got to have a one-line pitch if you want to get a movie. And it was that it was that one line that really got us Maid Marian and her Merry Men, that she was running the gang, Robin was just this vain idiot, and no one ever intervened with us. No, there was just the director and me, and although all of it was for children, and every line had to have a message that was directed for children, of course there was a bit of me, just as there are bits of Roald Dahl and Joan Aitken and all the great children's writers, which is an adult and can't resist saying things that it would not. So, I mean, there were lines in it like, I can remember Maid Marian said, "Men, they promise you the world and you end up flat on your back servicing their muck spreader." Which was a deeply political line for young girls, but it also had other reflections in it for older people.
But that's a lot. I mean, it's great. It's a little bit ahead of its time as well, maybe in switching that around, the gender thing, and it's a lovely idea that Maid Marian would be in charge, and just a welcome relief from the traditional Robin Hood, so where Maid Marian's just this.
Yeah, I think
it
was very much of its time. But I wanted to write something that was meaty, something that kids really could engage in. And I've always felt, and I just feel this so passionately, so I'm getting upset now. I always feel that education ought to be about, you show the kids something and say, this is not the only thing that this thing can be. It doesn't have to just be this. You can turn it this way and it's something else. You can turn it that way, it's something else. You can stick it on your head and it's a hat, whatever. And it's up to you. You can transform the world. You can transform things just by thinking of them in a different way. So really subverting the Robin Hood stories was a way of me saying, kids, you all know the Robin Hood stories. They just don't have to be like that.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. And it was funny as well. So it didn't, and that's the problem with a lot of doing something that's political. It can be quite dry and boring. But primarily that was a funny show. But you would sit down and think about it and go, oh, hey, that's interesting, and that's turned. So that was
the idea behind it.
It was fantastic. But you are. I don't know if people know You are very political. You've been very involved in the Labour Party for many years.
Well, it's funny because I suppose the other inspiration for Maid Marian was, you've got this woman who is a utopian who believes that she can transform the world, but she's surrounded by complete arseheads.
Yeah.
That's what it was like being in a branch of the Labour Party in Bristol. And indeed, some might say now.
Well, let's not get into trouble. How did you feel? Was it difficult to accept the knighthood with the? I presume you're a Republican.
Yeah.
Was it ever a question of?
No, it wasn't at all. And I'll tell you why. I think that one of the good things that the Blair government did was. They had a look at the honours system and took it away from the PR department of Buckingham Palace and just like the leader of the opposition and the leader of the government. And they passed it on to a committee of between 30 and 50 people, essentially the great and the good, but nevertheless like a vetting committee. And essentially it's up to them who they choose. Anybody can nominate anybody they like to be an MBE, an OB or whatever. The honours committee then look at it and say, what do we think? Do we think this person has done service to their country? What level of service do we think that they've done to their country? That kind of thing. And to be honest, I just think that's cool. Yeah. That there's this bunch of people whose job it is to say, has this person done service to their country? To be rewarded for that in the autumn of your years, I think is just bloody great. And I've never felt that in any way I was traducing my own politics to do it.
No. And you went to Buckingham Palace. I'm a massive fan of Time Team, so we might talk about that for the rest of the. As I was into archaeology when I did some archaeological digs when I was younger, and I'm really into history. But you did one in Buckingham Palace, in the gardens of Buckingham Palace. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it was called Time Team's Big Royal Dig, and. I got terribly confused because it was supposed to be live and then it was as live, and I never knew precisely what time it was going out. Although when we got to the actual first real live dig, I thought that it was going out at 8 o'clock. And so round about 10 to 7, we were just rehearsing in a fairly relaxed way as we had been for the rest of the day. And I said, can you hold on for a bit? Because I've just got to go for a whiz. And the production manager was ashen-faced and said, you can't go now, you can't. We go live in 7 minutes. Now, the problem was that the portaloos were right round the other side of Buckingham Palace to where we were. They had to be hidden from the general public. And there was no way that I was going to be able to get a wee in time. But I'm a middle-aged man. I have a prostate, which we will get onto later, I'm sure. And I was just going to have a wee. So I looked round me, and sloping away from me were Buckingham Palace gardens. So I sprinted into the garden, and there was this tiny little wood in the middle of the garden. So I got round the back of a hornbeam, which has got quite a large trunk, and so I knew I wouldn't be able to be seen from the palace. And I started to have a wee. And as I did so, there was this strange buzzing noise. And I looked up, and there was a camera fixed to the top of the trunk, and it was just going downwards, and then it just went a little bit left, so that it was right focusing on me. And I don't know about you, Richard, but I find it terribly difficult to have a wee if someone's looking.
I do, yeah.
And I was struggling to wee, knowing that the time was ticking away, but I knew I had to finish. And eventually, just as I finished, there was a flurry, and out of the bushes came a copper with a stab jacket and a big dog. And he came right up to me, and he leant by the side of my head, and he murmured, I bet everyone wishes they could do that. And then he just disappeared again.
So you pissed in the Queen's garden?
I did.
That's fantastic work. Do you remember going to Cheddar Gorge in Time Team? Don't think it was a very good one, to be honest.
Oh, No, it was
I
really...
don't think you found anything.
It was really weird for me because those of you who know Cheddar, as obviously Richard does, that's where you come from, isn't it?
Well, that's where I grew up, yeah.
It's the road is a long, long slope, and there are caves off it, and a lot of them were populated in the Neolithic and the Mesolithic and possibly even earlier than that. The trouble is, because the road is a slope, every time it rains, it takes the mud down and a load of it goes into the caves. And we were looking for prehistoric remains, but in order to do that, we had to get through something like 15 feet of essentially of slurry in order to get to anything. And it was by far the most exhausting dig that I'd ever done. And I used to go home and I would neck, or back to some motel we were staying at, and I would neck about half a bottle of wine, and then I would just go straight to sleep. And I think it was on the second night that I dreamt that I was wandering through a forest, and it was autumn, and I could hear the rain on the leaves, and some of the leaves were just coming down and landing at my feet. And then I woke up and I realised I was sleepwalking and I was pissing in my open suitcase. That's my biggest memory of the excavation.
Cheddar does that to someone. It's nice to have two piss. Maybe all your stories just end in you pissing in just inappropriate places. I hope so. I really do. Well, we'll talk about Blackadder, but I don't want to talk about the usual things. I'm more interested. You nearly turned Blackadder down originally. I think it says.
Well, yeah, I did. It was. My God, the pilot was. It was really, really lame, the pilot. And I'd left school at 16. I got 4 O-levels. That's the sum total of my education. And I'd seen what I thought of as Oxbridge comedy shows on the television since I'd been very young. The first one I remember that I saw was The Week That Was. And when I saw it, it was like, the first time I heard Dylan or Bruce Springsteen or John Lennon, I thought, how can he possibly have written that yet when he hasn't even met me? It seemed so personal. And seeing that was The Week That Was, it was a show unlike anything that there had ever been on television. It was a show that could only have been made when a radical director general was in charge of the BBC, when a Labour government was in charge. It was very much that sort of early 60s sort of thing. It was wonderful. And then, of course, after that, there were all the shows with John Bird and John Fortune in them and Eleanor Bron, and then later there was Python and 40 Towers, and after that there was Not the 9 O'Clock News, all of which I thought were absolutely sublime, and all of which I was confident that I would have been at home in, that I could serve those people in some way. But there was never going to be any way that I could break into that charmed circle of people. They were all, I knew they'd all been to the same public schools. They would have all been to the same universities. They'd all appeared in footlights at the same time. And then out of the blue, I got this script for Rowan Atkinson's new comedy series. Rowan had been one of the stars of Not the 9 O'Clock News. I couldn't believe that I'd got this break. I couldn't see why anyone would have given it to me. And it was to play Rowan's comedy servant, and I looked through the script. I couldn't find this bloody part anywhere. And in fact, there were only about eight lines. None of them were funny. They were all foils for Rowan's character. And as I say, it was a really mediocre script. But I thought, and I really wrestled about whether I should take it or not, but I hadn't worked for about a month, and a half-hour TV show in that day was enough. That would have paid all the debts that I'd accrued during the course of that month. And also I thought, if I could be with those people, maybe, just maybe, they would realise that, I was one of them, kind of thing. And the reason that I got it, and it was quite ironic, Richard's line when he was introducing me about me having played Titch in Big Jim and the Figaro Club, that was just an opt-out, a comedy opt-out for the BBC in the Southwest, which I'd been in one episode of, about a year before, and the head of BBC Comedy at the time had written me down as sort of small and vaguely humorous. and with about 3 days to go before this Blackadder pilot was due to be made, they hadn't got anyone to play this servant, and no one wanted to play the part.
Right.
I'm not being falsely modest about this. If you get a script 3 days before a show starts, you know you're not the first choice. And they offered it to me, and I mean, it took a long time before it took off, but you know, that dream of being part of that circuit of people just happened beyond my wildest dreams. And I remember on the first day of the first series, we were all going up north, because some of you may remember that we shot a lot of it in outside Alnwick Castle, that first series. And on the way up, John Lloyd, the producer, said to me, "So how are you going to handle being famous then?" And I said, "Don't be daft. I've got by now it was 13 lines." And he said, "You're the comedy servant. Everybody loves Roe. Everybody loves a comedy servant. It's going to happen to you." And I just poo-pooed him. And 2 years later, it had happened.
Yeah,
it was so weird. It's it's like talking about a Hollywood lucky break, isn't it? And yet that is really, truly what happened to me.
But it was partly as well, and I'm getting more obsessed with this man by the podcast. It was partly because Brian Blessed was in the cast. That was one of the things that attracted you to it. But have you got any good stories about Brian Blessed? I'm sure you must have.
One day, I was having a pee. I think Brian was probably the saving grace of the first Blackadder series, because Rowan's character wasn't right, and he knew it wasn't right. But the trouble with TV comedy is it's like a production line. Once you're committed to it, you can't kind of escape. You can't rewrite it. You can't recast it. You can't change the costumes. All that's been done way down the line. So Rowan's character, and Rowan has this kind of filigree, subtle humour, as I'm sure you would all agree, but he wasn't quite doing that. It was all a bit squeaky and weird in the first series. But because we had got Brian in it as his foil, Brian is so huge, his comedy is so vast, echoes everywhere. You have to dodge his comedy, because if you receive it in the face, your nose will bleed. And so it made Rowan's character look far subtler than it actually was. And Brian is like that off stage as well as on. I remember at lunchtime, you tended to go down to the old Shepherd's Bush shopping centre, not the big Westfield, but the one on the other side of the green, which is still there. And I remember I was shopping there one lunchtime, and suddenly I was grabbed round the neck and I was thrown into a headlock in this crowded shopping centre by Brian Blessed. And he kind of threw me 3/4 of the way to the ground, and he boomed out, "Officer, arrest this man! He fucks old ladies!" And with anybody else, it would have been so nasty. But because it was Brian, everybody else in the shopping centre went, "Oh, it's Brian Blessed."
Good, I knew you would. So, good,
That wasn't planned, by the way.
Oh, dear. And I suppose, I mean, with Baldrick it changed as well. The first series, Baldrick wasn't the same character either, was he, really? So it changed.
No.
I mean, the first series, I think sort of everyone acknowledges it wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
It was right enough to get a second series, luckily. But it all sort of started coming together after that.
Yeah, and a lot of that. Rowan is very self-effacing. I bloody love him. I really, sorry, I got a bit teary about this, because I would never have had the success that I had if it hadn't been for Rowan's generosity. Because if you think about the kind of role I had, it actually needed close-ups. You couldn't have done what I did without close-ups. And I had to react off what Rowan was saying, and often he would say a punchline, and then I would get the second laugh because I had the close-up. most big stars wouldn't have allowed someone out of nowhere to get those close-ups. They wouldn't have allowed that character to develop in the way he did. But, by the third series, I was getting second billing to Rowe. Yeah. And all of that was about his generosity. And after the first series, one of the things that he realised was there was no point in him getting a writing credit alongside Richard. And so he said, I will drop writing it, which again, ego-wise, was a very self-effacing thing to do. And they decided that they would bring Ben Elton in. And it was very inspiring because Ben really loved the series, but because he was such an outsider, he could see straight away what was wrong with it. And one of the things an observation he made, which I thought was brilliant, was in order to get Rowan's character to work, he needs to be really smart in one environment and really stupid in the other environment. So his whole ego can be bolstered up at home, and then he can go into the court thinking that he's absolutely brilliant and be absolutely exposed. And that is all we need, as it were, as a narrative, as energy to drive us through the series. But in order to make that work, he needed to have people who were much stupider than he was. And whereas in the first series, Baldrick was quite chipper in many ways, in the second series, we made him much more stupid so that Blackadder could think that he was much more clever. And we made him more and more stupid as the series went on. And I'm such an idiot that it took me 4 series to learn how to be stupid enough to be as stupid I was in the 4th series.
And has the cunning plan thing, obviously you've named your book after it, is it a bit of an albatross around your neck, or is it?
No, not at all. I mean, I was 38 by the time the first Blackadder series started, and as we said right at the beginning, I'd been an actor since I was 13, so it was like, what's that? It's a quarter of a century of being an actor, and suddenly this marvellous thing happens to me. So, in a way, had Blackadder happened and then nothing else had happened to me afterwards, I would have had enormous gratitude. The whole thing was so arbitrary. My biography, and I haven't plugged it at all yet.
You haven't, no.
My biography, which has actually got lots more interesting stories other than the ones is called No Cunning Plan, just because you can't have as a freelance these kind of things just happen to you. What was the question?
Well, I'm assuming everywhere you go, people are going, hey, have you got a cunning plan? And this cunning, and it must get on your nerves.
Oh no, it was lovely because people smile at you like they've just thought it up. It's nearly always blokes. They middle-aged blokes. They come up to me and say, "Here, Tone, have you got a cunning plan?" And their wife is next to them, and in her eyes you can see they're thinking, "You cunt." But then as many people say to me, you can dig my garden up any time. It's kind of, either or.
Yeah. Very good. Do you like drinking?
I can say that on a podcast.
You can say cunt,
great,
you can say anything you like.
Yeah.
Your book is very open. Actually, you talk about, which I think might surprise people, you talk about taking drugs when you're younger, and there's some sexy bits in there when you're younger. I haven't got to the when you're older bit. There might be sexy bits when you're older as well.
Just wait, mate. I'm so glad we didn't do this interview before you got all the way through it. In Richard's defence, you didn't get the book until late this afternoon,
no, I
did
asked,
you?
They said they'd send me the book last week.
Yeah.
And I've been waiting for it to arrive.
Yeah.
And I think, well,
that's
come
why
tomorrow.
you're going to have a publisher.
And then they biked it to me, and then there was 2 hours later. I went, shall I just download it on the Kindle? I don't mind. And then, so it finally came. So I've read 80 pages. It's good. It's a very good book because it's written very much in your voice. It's very honest, I think.
It is me. There's no ghostwriter or anything.
Yeah.
Like that. I just decided I really wanted to write my stuff.
Yeah.
And I got a text just before we came on. This is true. I got a text to say, it's number 8 in the W.H. Smiths at Heathrow Airport. Yes! Come on!
That's the big one. That's the big one. That's what everyone's after. I should ask you some emergency questions at some point, but first I have to... Do you like drinking tea, Sir Tony Robinson? Because you should try nothing but tea. It's loose leaf tea and tea-related accessories. If you're interested, you can go to nbt.co.uk. Just thought I'd tell you. So
Is this one of your emergency questions?
that was one of my emergency
They are famed, aren't they? Are they all bollocks?
They're mainly bollocks. I'll ask you a proper one. That was a little plug. If you were given the powers of a King Midas, but you could turn the things into anything you wanted. It doesn't have to be gold. Everything you touch will turn into it, though. That's the worry. What would you have your stuff turn into? There you go. That's Foxture. Have you got a cunning plan for that one? Have you, Tony? I used his own thing against him. And this is the moment he snaps and kills the person.
Now, I tell you what my long pause is, apart from not being very good at improvising. My long pause is that it's about my downstairs front bit again.
Is it?
When you get to a certain age and you're a bloke, you want to wee about 19 times a day.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to touch my testicles and no longer want to wee.
Okay.
That would be so beautiful. You know, when I'm walking up the road,
You know, that isn't where wee comes from.
I'm getting sort of derisive sniggers from most of the audience, except
your
from the
wee a
men
straight-
over 50, all of whom are nodding. And it's true, as you walk up the road towards your house, when you get to my age, you suddenly know you've got to do it. It may well be before you hit the front door.
But if you were King Midas, everything you touch would turn to your testicles not doing a wee. That could be... your testicles they do a sort of a wee, Tony, but it's not...
It's a golden shower.
It's a special kind of wee.
Didn't work, did it?
How are you feeling at the moment? You all right? Do you need a...
Embarrassed. There's a crap answer.
If you need a wee...
Crap question, but an even worse answer.
If you need a wee break, just let me know, and we can do one somewhere. Do it in that bottle. We'll empty that bottle. You can do it in front of everyone.
Well, look. Can I finish off this whole? I promise I won't mention anything to do with downstairs, other than the fact that what people who are listening to this on a podcast won't know is that I have this dreadful moustache.
It's the beginning of a moustache.
Yeah, which I'm growing for what's it called, Movember.
Movember, yeah.
For prostate awareness, because prostate cancer is such a rubbish disease. So many people die of it, and it's such a horrible, horrible death. And it's so easy to check for. And blokes of my age, by and large, just don't check for it. And all they need to do is such an easy thing to stop yourself dying this horrible death. And I can remember, like, when I was in my late teens, this whole thing happened as far as breast cancer was concerned. And that's, you know, that the number of deaths from breast cancer is tiny compared to how it used to be, but it's still frustratingly about the same for prostate cancer. And so it's worth making a complete lunatic of myself, I think, because it gives you the excuse to be able to talk about it just for a month or so.
Sure. And I'm sure by the end of it's early in November, Tony, that's going to be a fine moustache. When was the last time you grew a moustache?
It might even have been for the second Blackadder series.
Oh, yes,
that was my real stuff. So anyway, if anyone who goes on Twitter, they can see the link, and if they want to give any money to prostate awareness, I would be deeply grateful.
Fantastic.
He's browsing through his notes.
There's going to be
absolutely fantastic.
Well, I am, because I'm a professional. I'm an unprepared professional. Do you think that having sex with a robot counts as cheating on your partner? Because I don't.
Every time I watch Westworld, I think, it's fine, absolutely fine.
Well, they're just robots.
Go with it, yeah.
The problem with every drama that tackles the issue is that the robots always gain sentience, but in reality, they won't gain sentience, so it's fine.
Do we know that for certain?
I do know that for certain. They're just machines. It's an elaborate wank, Sir Tony Robbins. That's all it is. So I nearly forgot to call him Sir Tony Robbins.
Were you calling me that?
No. I think it should be all right, but my wife disagrees with me. She wouldn't let me have sex with... She would divorce me if I had sex with a sexy robot. It doesn't even have to be a sexy robot.
Would she rather you had sex with a sexy robot than a sexy person?
Well, I think probably, but I think she would count it as almost the same thing, which I really...
That's so unfair.
Yeah, that is unfair.
Yeah. Can you just like get a yellow card rather than a red one?
No, that's what I think there should be. I mean, I've been, been with her for 9 years. I mean, what does she want?
Probably more than she's currently receiving.
It's an interesting philosophical question. So, Tony Robinson, have you ever tried to suck your own cock? So the first sir I've asked this question to.
I'm a man! What kind of question is that?
Good. Would you have told Prince William that if he'd asked you when he was 9?
Yeah, he is such a... Actually, yeah, you're right, I'm not the greatest fan of the monarchy by any means, but what was so sweet about him was he was really chatty. It was just... And he had just had that look in his eyes about, this is all a bit ironic, really, and you know it's ironic, and I know it's ironic, which was sweet. And he said that he was a big fan of Blackadder, and I said, this is all, during the blah, 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 blah bit. And I said... would you ever be in it? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, if wherever we do another one, can our people get in touch with your people? So I'm being knighted and doing the most effective casting session I've ever done.
See, I'm terrible at schmoozing. That's why I keep meeting people and then not asking them to do the show. And you were being knighted and asking Prince William to be in
my show.
To be in Blackadder. Which I'm presuming there won't be any more Blackadder, though. Do you think
I didn't know. I would probably do it. I think on his good days, I think Rowan would. But the problem is, and it's quite a good argument, actually. We went out on such a high, and people would kind of expect the series to go on from there. But the reality is, however good it was, even if objectively it was twice as good as Blackadder goes forth, people's sensibilities wouldn't be in the same place anymore. They've moved on by 25 years or however long it is, so they wouldn't receive it in the same way. So they would be going, oh, it's not as good as it was in the old days.
Yeah.
And I think, so people think we're on a hiding to nothing.
I think it's true. I mean, but the BBC have obviously just done this big season of repeating and reimagining old sitcoms. I mean, it wouldn't work without you guys in it, though, would it? I don't think that would be the son of Blackadder, the son of Baldrick.
The idea which I think we could do, and this is only the beginning of an idea, so I think you'd all have to develop it in your own imaginations. Ryan once said to me, wouldn't it be great if we could take over the Royal Tournament? That we could do one which was about this huge, colossal, it would be live, and it would be about this huge, colossal battle, and we'd see all the guns moving around, and there'd be screens, so we could do the acting as well, and people would come in and have a royal tournament and a live Blackadder experience at the same time. And I know that's kind of not quite right, but something as way out as that, I think probably could work in the best of all possible worlds. Yeah. Or else we could go to Australia, tour it for 6 weeks and all earn £1 million each.
Good idea. That could work. You had a run-in with Michael Gove. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Michael Gove's, even on the scale of my lack of fandom of most Tories. He comes low down.
He's a funny guy, really, because I think there is part of him that is very, very smart. But like some of those really smart, geeky boys at school, he's also a complete wanker. and you've seen it time and time again. He destroys himself in the midst of his own cleverness. And there was a time when he was Secretary of State for Education, when he said that he didn't think that shows like Blackadder or films like Oh, What a Lovely War should be used by teachers who were teaching children the history of the First World War. Apart from anything else, he said he thought they were offensive to the British officer class in the First World War and made them all seem like idiots. There are so many reasons why that was a really faulty observation. One of them, I think, is that it shows no understanding at all of how teachers use something like Blackadder when they're teaching the First World War. It's like, if you offer the kids a First World War poet, the kids aren't going to come away from the class thinking that the whole First World War rhymed. They will understand that it is a means of engagement, and likewise they would do exactly the same as far as the Blackadder is concerned, and also as far as the officer class is concerned. The fact is that the vast majority of the officer class modelled their idea of war on the Boer Wars, the South African Wars in the late 19th century. They weren't modern. They were foolish. They were profoundly class-bound, and didn't have the flexibility, for instance, that the Australian officer class in the First World War had, who by and large were pretty damn good because they didn't have that same class-bound view. So I think as far as our sensibility is concerned, a lot of them were complete dunderheads. And for the Secretary of State of Education to miss all of that, I just thought was really foolish. And so I went on television a number of times and explained how foolish I thought that he was. And as you can see, his career crashed and burned, and he's now a backbencher.
If people had only listened to you at the time, I think him saying we've all had enough of experts, I think that's the turning point in the history of Western civilization. I think that's the point you can go, that's where it all started to fuck up. When Michael Gove said that was the moment there was no way back, when we've decided that we mustn't listen to experts, which is what politics has sort of become.
Yeah.
We can tell, we can now just lie, we can just ignore evidence.
But it's become like a Western disease, hasn't it? I don't know if I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, because I don't know how much this broadcast depends on time, but actually as far as this audience are concerned, at this moment we're 36 hours away from America making what could be the most terrible decision any group of people have made in a democracy ever. Mm-hmm. And exactly that same attitude is coming out, isn't it? Yeah. Don't trust experts. I tweeted this morning that at the moment Hillary seems to have a 1.5% lead in the polls, but given how profoundly fallible polls have turned out in the last 2 years, that makes it even more terrifying. The fact that she's in the lead makes me even more scared, because polls are always wrong. And just before when I was in the cab coming here this evening, I saw that Mark Gatiss had tweeted almost exactly the same thing, because he's a plagiarist. But but I suspect that some of you have got that same feeling of dreadful nervousness. This man who won't listen to experts could be king of the world in 36 hours.
Thinks that global warming is a Chinese hoax.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of it's amazing the way it works, and the way it actually convinces people, and the way that people with those politicians, those super rich guys, Farage as well. They're these guys who come from a privileged background and are trying to go with their own agenda, and yet somehow they convince people that they're men of the people and that they're the ones you should. A billionaire in America is trying to convince American people he has their interests at heart, and he's not like the other ones. It's sort of amazing that it works. I mean, it's why fascism worked in the 1930s. It's the same basic impetus, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of these kind of Jack the Lad popularists, they actually work on it much more than you think. There was a documentary about Hitler that was on last year, which was quite phenomenal. And it showed, all that kind of strutting around Charlie Chaplin stuff. Yeah. He worked on that. That was a character he developed for himself, because he knew how much it would link in with a yearning that there was in Germany at the time, and I suspect an awful lot of that is true of Trump. I can't believe that he is quite as dumb as there's a smart dumbness, scary smart dumbness about him, which is terrifying.
Well, I think Chaplin and Hitler. I've been interested in both those characters, but I think he recognised a bit of himself in Hitler, in that he channeled his dictatorial things into creativity rather than but he was quite a tyrannical figure within what he did. But it's interesting. I think a lot of the dictators and a lot of those populist politicians are more like comedians than like politicians.
Yeah.
So I think with Trump, you're sort of laughing at them to begin with, but and with Farage. I mean, Farage is basically the pub landlord He's taken all the bits of Al Murray, the Paddle Landlord, in the way that I think Hitler took a lot of the bits of Chaplin. I think deliberately, because it makes you think, oh, I've got the pint, I've got the thing. We like Al Murray when he does that, so we're going to like you, even though you're a horrible, disgusting little vile creature.
Yeah, and quite often these people do have an awful lot of charm about them. I mean, I've read a lot of stuff online about people who say that they met Trump 10 or 15 years ago, and he was very charming. I was once stuck trying to get on Eurostar in the car in front of Nigel Farage, who it turns out is a big Time Team fan, right. And secondly knows predictably an awful lot about the Western Front.
Yeah.
And we agreed not to talk politics and talked about everything else for half an hour.
Right.
And he was a very charming bloke.
Sure.
He really was. And you could see why in meetings, however scary a lot of his beliefs are, he was and is able to persuade people just through the force of his own charm.
Well, he's the most successful UK politician in this generation.
Yeah.
You know, that's the terrifying thing. In fact, he's got what he wanted. He got into the European Parliament. He didn't get into they had one MP, and he's managed to achieve probably everything that he wanted to achieve. So that's well done, Nigel Farage. You must feel very happy with yourself. Well, we haven't got too much longer, but let's see what else we can get in. You were in the Young Ones.
Oh, there's a really lovely episode called Bambi. I think
it's called Bambi. It's the University Channel.
And both Mel and Griff were in it,
yeah.
And Emma Thompson was in it, and Ben and
Stephen Fry,
Hugh Laurie was in it, and Robbie Coltrane was in it. Robbie played somebody called, for reasons I have no idea, Dr. Not the 9 o'clock news, and I played Dr. somebody else.
Right.
And I came to him, and people will probably remember this much better than me. I said, Doctor, there's a man outside with a terrible disease. He looks like an elephant. Can you, we're dressed as Victorians. Can you imagine a more heinous, hideous thing to happen to a man than that he should have the visage of an elephant? And I open the door, and in comes a baby elephant. And in rehearsals, that was absolutely fine, except that the damned elephant wouldn't come through the door. We couldn't persuade him however much we tried. So the trainer, in the end, put a great big box of fruit and veg on the other side of the set, so he would know to come on, and then he would get rewarded. So when we actually did it on the night, I said this line, the elephant came in, but of course, foolishly, the trainer had put it on the far side of the set. So the elephant pissed all the way through the set, took out the set on the far side of the stage. Everyone fled like mad until he found his oranges and his carrots and whatever it was in his box. And so we had to do it again. I'd always hoped that they would find a way of keeping that outtake in, because I just thought it would have been such a great thing to have seen, like in Amy Schumer, a great thing to have seen in the credits, but they didn't keep it in.
You've got an incredibly good memory about, because I'm picking things out at random, and I've had people of my age, and I'm very young, and younger. You go, do you remember this thing? Cans Chuan is my age. Go, do you remember this? Go, no, I don't remember what that is. Everything I ask you, you've got like a very clear recall of, which is very impressive. Because you've done so many things over the years. So is it partly because you've written your biography and thought about all these things, or is it because
I think it's mainly that. I've just been around an awful long time, so I've been interviewed an awful lot. Writing that book, the book took me 11 months, and for 11 months, whereas in previous years I'd always been out making telly or, on the road or whatever, for 11 months I just sort of sat in my room thinking about stuff out of my life and formulating it so it would tend to end in some kind of payoff. Yeah. And so I think an awful lot of my life I've kind of reinterpreted into those kind of narrative arcs.
Sure.
It's kind of fun for me. It's much more fun for me to tell them when I know vaguely how they're going to go to it.
But it sounds like you had a lot of fun when you were young, and so a lot of people would have, fried something up there and not be able to.
Oh, I fried an awful lot up there. But between about 1965 and 1975, I do remember very little. Very little. And friends have sort of helped to fill that in, charitable friends. But writing about when I was a kid and when I was a teenager, I really found very easy, because I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but you kind of, remembering that time, it's sort of you, but it's you through the other end of a telescope, and you can feel quite, whatever the mess-ups in your life were, you can remember them, but be quite affectionate about that person. And so writing about me at that age, I found really very easy, and I was able to be objective about. For me, from about 40 on, the age of 40 on, being the person who I probably by and large still am, that was much more difficult, because you have to be close enough to the events to be able to write about it honestly and with the emotion that those events generated, but far enough away to continue to be objective about it. And getting that balance right was a really intriguing but difficult writing task.
Yeah. Oh, well,
no gag in that one, but
no,
I
it's
find
no,
it
it's
interesting.
there's no need to be a gag. It's very interesting. I know. I think it's sort of, well, it's such a full life, and it's, you know, I think people will be surprised to find out that you're in your 70s. I mean, that's kind of
70 on my last birthday.
Yeah, which is amazing. But you've been, you know, working all that time since you.
Any other show, I'd get a bloody round for that.
Well done for staying alive. Please get to the end of the year.
You'll feel shit if I don't.
I mean, well, I know you're not a black fucking knight again if it comes under Sir Tony Robinson from Blackadder and Tales of Fat Tulip's Garden. Sadly, is still alive today. That's the only way it goes. So it's well, look, it's been really lovely to talk to you. There's so many things we could talk about, and I'm just wondering whether I've missed anything massive. There's great stories. There's great stories about Judy Garland, Liza Minnelli, John Wayne pushing you in a dock. Got to read the book though. Let's save some stuff for the book. You had imaginary friends when you were a child.
Doesn't everybody?
Well, how did your? I'm quite fascinated by imaginary friends. I don't think I did have imaginary friends.
Oh yeah. I was an only child.
Yeah.
And I can remember.
I mean, I played myself at snooker and Subbuteo, but that doesn't. I knew it was me.
Yeah, all my imaginary friends were always around. They were always with me, and we were always, fighting wars together and stuff. Yeah.
What form did they take?
They were humans. I feel really embarrassed about it. I'm not going to tell you their names or anything. No, a man's imaginary friends are his imaginary friends.
That's fair.
Between him and himself.
I've gone too far. I can sense. I overstepped a mark that, sucking your own cock was fine, but this Stephen Merchant all over again. It was going so well. And what's coming up? Are you doing more ancient tracks? Is that
yes. At the moment, I'm doing a series called Tony Robinson's Ancient Tracks, and everyone on Twitter said, "What is it about Keith Richard?" It's like the Pilgrim's Way and the Foss Way and all those kind of tracks. I've actually walked coast to coast and over 6 episodes, and that goes out on Channel 5 next year.
Oh, great, cool. Good.
So there's still stuff out there. Hoping that there's another series of Man Down.
Man Down, which you were awesome in.
Thank you.
Will that character be returning?
I think Greg's attitude is Greg and I are getting on really well. And his attitude is, I would really, really like you to be in it. I don't want to mess up the whole narrative by sort of like promising you something that I can't do, but for the moment, know that I would like you to be in it. But let's see what happens.
It's a fantastic show. It's there's a lot of really good sitcoms coming out at the moment. I think that's.
It's young ones for 40-somethings.
It is, yeah. And your character in it is really nasty, which must have been so much fun to play.
So I haven't really played a very nasty character, I guess, since the sheriff in Maid Marian and Her Merry Men. And it's such a release and a relief, because most of the characters that I've been asked to play, I suppose mainly because A, I've got big eyes, and B, I'm short, have been charming or funny or trying to be like the audience in my documentaries. So people assume, by and large, that I'm sort of charming in my life. But like everyone, and particularly every performer, I'm, you know, a self-obsessed, nasty bigot.
Yeah, well, it's terrifying seeing you play that character.
Yeah, and it was lovely to be able to just to say that, just to look at Greg and say, "What are you doing here, you giraffe full of shit?" It's so just such pleasure to be able to say he's a very, very fine writer. He is the Rick Mail of our days, I think, and it's no coincidence that he should have asked Rick to be in that first series as his dad. What a giveaway that is. You know.
Oh, terrific. Well, I really hope you are in those again, because it was terrifying and amazing, and that's great. But and well, I hope you do carry on doing acting and your documentary and historical stuff, which I love. So, and thanks so much for coming on this. Read Tony's book, Sir Tony Robinson's. You should put Sir on the front. No Cunning Plan.
That's the book.
Yeah.
And the charity is Prostate Awareness.
Yeah, fantastic.
For the month of November.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Tony Robinson. How'd you like them sky potatoes?